You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Loman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Loman.
Welcome to the House of Sunny, where it is always sunny. I am your host, Doug, from the Rational Capitalist blog, theratcap.com. You can also find me on Facebook at The Rational Capitalist. I am sitting in for Sunny while she remains on hiatus for the last few weeks. She should be back fairly soon, but maybe we will hear from her soon. Right now, I'd like to bring in my producer, sidekick, all-around brilliant man, Ben. Hello, Ben.
Oh, well, hello, Doug. Thank you for the kind words. You having a good week, my friend?
Not really. I think in some ways I've had a pretty good week, you know. So before we get into the current events, because last time we were a little jokey last time. We kind of told a lot of jokes.
We sure did.
And we were real stinkers last week. And we're gonna talk a little bit about current events because I have some takes I want to get to on the election and what's going on, what I think fundamentally is driving sort of everything at a deeper level. But traditionally, we like to tell a few jokes, and we're going to get into some more jokey things after we talk about the news a little bit. We have a couple bits we want to get into, but you got any good jokes for me? Make us laugh a little bit before we start. I don't have the. If someone called in a joke this week on the voicemail, I'm sorry that I'm not playing it. I didn't get the voicemail this week. My fault. So if they're on there, we'll definitely get to them next week. So, but right now we're going to tell you our own jokes. So
I think I may have a couple lying around here. Let's see here. I'm physically looking in a bag right now for my jokes. Just picture it. Jokes? Yes. Oh, I found one.
Oh, good.
Yes, here
Tell
it
us.
is. How do you get a nun pregnant?
How do you get a nun pregnant? How?
You dress her like an altar boy.
Ah.
Oh.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the priests don't they like anal? So that might not work. They might not get her pregnant. And that's kind of gross, but
I think they like whatever they can get their hands on.
Because their idea is they're gay, so I don't know if that would.
Well, they're only gay because they only have access to altar boys. Little girls are not allowed to be on the altar with the priest.
So you're just saying they're just like sexually, they're polyamorous or whatever that's called.
They're opportunists. They just take whatever is like closest to them.
Whatever hole is in their immediate vision is what they will put in. Okay. Good people. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. What did one tampon say to the other tampon?
What?
Nothing. They're stuck-up cunts.
Oh! You know, as usual, I've fallen asleep at my at this thing. I was a little late on that. Sorry.
Your laugh tracks are like creeper weed, dude.
That's right. It takes my laugh track a second to really integrate the joke, and then it just goes wild.
Right. And I have one more little thing that's just sort of an extension of the whole priest pedo thing. You can say what you want about pedophiles, but they do drive a lot slower in school zones.
Hold on. That's pretty good.
Dude, I think you need to make that laugh track into a keychain so that you can use that out in the real world.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Like someone just tries to lay something on you, like the person checking you out at Target or something tries to be like, working hard or hardly working or whatever. You just like stare at them blankly and press your laugh track.
That would be great. Hey, you know what happened this week? This is a real weird one. So my wife's at a car wash, and you know the kind you go through the car wash and then you have to go through the dryer?
Yeah.
You know, it says drive forward, and then there's a big dryer thing that goes on. You just kind of slowly go through it. So there's a guy in front of her who gets done, and he's going through the dryer. And so she pulls in, and her car is getting washed, and she noticed that this guy is still under the dryer. He hasn't moved. You know, usually that takes 20 seconds, and then they just drive on.
Yeah.
So she goes through her car wash. The car wash finishes, and this guy is still under the dryer.
What?
So it tells her to drive forward, but of course she can't because the guy is still there. And the dryer goes on, and he used her dryer time. He stole her dryer time.
You've got to be kidding me.
Isn't that diabolical? He stayed there.
Do you think that was premeditated?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So I wonder how much he thinks he saved. Like, how much is because, like, how do you break down the percentage of how much water versus energy.
Well, how important was it for him to get every morsel of H2O off his vehicle? Like, when you leave a car wash, there's going to be some water on your car. Like, who cares? Like, you dry it as much as you can, and then you drive away. But
being out in the world is almost impossible sometimes. There are people who literally take tiny little advantages anytime they can.
Yes.
I was at this coffee shop in my neighborhood a few days ago, and there was a really long line. There always is at this place. And this dude just slinks over. There's clearly a line that's basically going out the door. This dude walks past the line.
Oh, no.
Pretends he's going to do something else, and then just kind of slides up next to me and just starts ordering. I'm the first.
What?
I'm the first in line. Yeah. And he's like, tell me. And not only did he do that, but he was like, tell me about these bagel sandwiches.
Oh, no.
And I'm thinking, dude,
what?
It's like a regular sandwich, but with a bagel instead of bread.
So he wanted like color commentary on the menu options after he cut in line.
Yeah,
he doubled down on it.
So the chick behind the counter is clearly like irritated, and she's kind of looking at me like, sorry. And then
she should have kicked him to the back of the line. That's up to the employee. They got to kick him to the back.
Well, I ended up. So anyway, she goes through quickly. We have anything bagels. We have poppy seed. It's just our sandwich. It's just a sandwich. Whatever. The dude orders, and then he launches into, I used to wash your windows here.
Shut up.
Yeah, apparently he used to be the dude that washed the windows. So I think he thought that was his way to the front, whatever. So he orders, and then I say to him, I was like, hey, for next time, see that line? And he turns his head. I go, that's the line. And he didn't react at all.
Oh.
Because he knew what he was doing.
Wow. My dad, once when we were kids, he came out of Burger King really pissed off. Because he was always pissed off, but he came out of Burger King, and he told us this story that an old woman cut in the line, like they were all waiting, and she just bounded to the front of the line, and she orders, and everyone's like, duh, no one would say anything, but everyone was pissed off. So as she walked out, he told us, I said to her, bon appetit, bitch.
I love your dad.
Isn't that a cute story? He shared that with the family when he got back in the car.
That's so good, dude. Actually, your dad's a hero.
And he said,
bon appetit, bitch.
And he goes, everyone in the store kind of quietly nodded and affirmed me, like, good job. Like they were all with him.
That's amazing.
But that's what that deserves. You can't do that.
I'll tell you a quick dad story. First time I went to New York, we went as partial family. It was my dad and I think two other siblings and myself. So we fly in, and we got in what I learned later was like a gypsy cab.
Yeah.
So
that's a cab that, like, it's not a real cab. It's just someone driving a car around that's willing to drive.
It's a freelancer. It's just a freelancer. But anyway.
It's someone who believes in the free market.
Yes. So, there's a lot of activity on that transportation level, and there's all kinds of cars. There's the yellow taxis, and there's all kinds, whatever.
Sure.
A guy found us. He's like, hey, I'll get you to your hotel, whatever. And there are laws in New York City that,
of course, especially at that time.
Yeah, where it can't cost more than X to get from LaGuardia or JFK to
the prices, the meters are all regulated.
Yeah, so anyway, I think it was like $25 or something at that time was like the max, and the guy gets us to our hotel, and he's like, $60.
Oh no!
And my dad's like, I believe the law is, $28 max or whatever it was. And the guy's like, this is a limo.
What?
And my dad goes, yeah, the guy goes, this is a limo. And I remember my dad just going, I think you're stretching the term limo here. And handed him $30. And we get out, and the guy is following us down the road.
What?
I'm like 11. He's like, you fucking robbed me, you son of a bitch. You fucking... Like, that's my first, 20 minutes in New York City.
Nice.
He's like, I'm going to come back here and mess you up, break your fucking kneecaps and shit, and I'm just like...
Oh, the Big Apple.
Yeah, I was like...
Take us to Times Square, please.
Yeah. It was... Yeah, I was like, take me back to Alloway, Pop. Like, this is...
So, I remember when I was in college, I was visiting schools, and I had gotten into a graduate school at Penn in Philadelphia. And the cab driver, this is my introduction to Philly. At this time, Philly's a really nice city. I think it's gotten a lot better. But at that time, back in the medieval period, it wasn't exactly in great shape. No. And Penn was in a really bad neighborhood. And I get in the cab, and... I told him where I was going and everything, and the guy goes, so what do you think of Philadelphia? And he goes, it doesn't matter who or where or when, they will get you. It's like, okay. That was my introduction to Philly. And then the next cab driver was outside of D.C. I think I was visiting, Maryland or something. And... the guy, I got in the cab, and I was going somewhere, and the guy asked me a question, and I think I just didn't hear him, and so I just kind of didn't respond, and he goes, I asked you a fucking question!
No! Come on.
Yeah, he just went off, and then he's like, duh! He's seriously pissed. This is the first 10 seconds of this ride, and, I've got a 20-minute ride ahead of me. And I was thinking about telling him to pull over, but I was too scared, so...
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd have to say that the coolest... Well, kind of funny, and it's a contrast to East Coast, cabbies, whatever. The first time I was in New Orleans, we took this cab, and this adorable older black man... We get in, and we're driving to wherever, the hotel... And he's like, right over there is where my mama was born.
Oh, God.
And see up here, that's where my brother went to school. And that's the playground I used to play on growing up just as a little boy. He just told us his whole... It was awesome, dude. I wanted to hug him.
But do you think he gives that story to everybody? Because, it wasn't like you're the first person that's been in his car, so...
I think that our way to our hotel just happened to be his entire life story in reverse.
No. I'm pretty sure he's given that story to everybody.
Wait a second, you're breaking my heart here. So that wasn't just for me.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Oh, farts.
Yeah.
Well, at least his tone was kind.
It was. Well, yeah. He was. I'd say most cabbies are pretty nice. I had a guy, I think the last time I was in New York, I had a cabbie. It was me and my wife were in the car, and he was talking to himself, and it sounded like he was maybe reciting the Quran or something. And I kind of look at my wife, and I'm like, is he got like one of those BlackBerry headsets? Like maybe his hands were free. He didn't have a phone to his ear, so. And we realized, no, I don't think he's on a cell phone. I think he's just talking to himself the whole time, which is I guess that's probably pretty common there. But I'll tell you, like, why, and that's just so common in big cities to jump in a cab and deal with something like that. And you just don't realize like what you're putting like I fully expected this guy to just like drive into a wall or something. I had no idea what he was doing. I thought maybe he's saying his last prayers or something. I don't know what he's doing.
Oh my God. Now cab drivers are all like Uber or Lyft, and it's like mid-50s white dudes, well dressed.
Yeah.
Totally clean, late model cars, and you're like, so, you're driving Lyft. Yep, work my full-time job, and then I do this about 20 hours a week.
Yeah, it's gotten so much better.
It is, it's so much better now.
By the way, like switching gears a little bit, so I thought of my wife's birthday was recently, and so, and I think everyone out there can use this one if you want. So she said, they're always, of course, they're expecting a gift. On their birthday. And this year I said, the journey is the reward.
Oh.
So I got her some extra journey. I promised her more journey. What do you think of that?
That's actually really thoughtful of you.
Thank you. I think everyone should feel free to use that. It's right, because the journey, that's what they always say, the journey's the reward. So
absolutely. I mean, basically you are like a gift, a lifelong gift that slowly unwraps itself.
That is exactly what I said. I mean, that's how I characterized it. So.
And then after she like expressed her disappointment, you at least took her to the Olive Garden, right?
I did for free breadsticks and unlimited breadsticks and salad bar. Yeah,
you're like, you can pick anything off this side of the menu, and we got to go during lunch hours because everything's
exactly.
$1 cheaper.
Exactly. At like 3:00, we had to leave.
You like slap a breadstick out of her hand.
Exactly. You're going to charge us for that. So
tremendous.
Good stuff. So. And then we got to talk a little bit about this politics stuff because it's just so crazy. So first of all, this Elizabeth Warren thing is the funniest thing that I think I've ever seen. Like, who in the hell is advising this woman? Do you think like she completely falls for this? Like he's calling her Pocahontas. So she goes. She doesn't even go to like the Midwest or Oklahoma or wherever she's from to get the DNA test. She doesn't even go to a college in Massachusetts where she's a senator. She goes to Stanford, like this elitist institution, to get a DNA test that tells her that she's like 1,024ths or something Indian. And of course, I've seen probably 700 memes on this, and every single one of them is funny. So I could not add one joke to what I've seen on the internet. It's so hilarious. But I just think I had to mention it because just the fact that she fell for that bait and released that, and the fact that we're at a point in our nation's history where someone is telling you that they're 1/1000th of Indian is so preposterous. I think it's.
And then what did Trump say when I think he was like standing out in the rain and people were asking her to just come out that she got that test, and he's like, "Who cares?"
Yeah, I hope she runs.
She'd be easy. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Not she'd be easy to beat. I hope she runs. He just goes, she'd be easy. It's gotten so cartoonish.
Yeah.
Like this back and forth, and the fact that so many of these wars are on Twitter and stuff, and like Trump calls Stormy Daniels horse face.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Nancy Pelosi is like talking about, like, alluding to Trump's junk now. Like, what? Where are we?
Yeah, yeah, and for them to have fallen for this is so fantastic. I mean, and this kind of gets into all these things that are going on. This sort of the level of discourse and the sense of this, like this election. Really, there's no central issue in this election that you can point to. I think in past elections there were a couple of like major sort of political topics, that were at stake. And in this election, I've noticed at least, or sensed, that there's really no central concrete issue. It's more a meta issue, which is the left is a mob, that the left has completely gone haywire. They're completely deranged. They're running around. Have you seen some of these NBC memes, by the way, which are really funny, that rightly characterize them as this sort of like faceless bovine herd that gets their talking points from CNN and the Huffington Post, and then there's shock troops go out in the street and harass people.
Yeah.
And this sort of situation we're in, as well as actual physical violence. I mean, this is not just three people. This is people organizing in Portland and other places where we're seeing real violence occurring, and there's been assaults on people in the GOP. There was assaults in Minnesota. I think they said something like, I've heard like the number is like hundreds of threatened or potential assaults, whatever. It's getting pretty scary. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this because so much of what we're seeing, from I think the social media purges to there was this briefing that was leaked to Breitbart. It was a briefing that Google put together, and this wasn't just like a couple of crazies at Google. They actually commissioned academics and researchers and advisors to put together this briefing called the Good Censor. It was like an 85-page briefing that essentially made the case for them to censor or I think that's a good way to put it, to suppress certain types of speech. And of course, we've seen the purging that's going on in the social media platforms, and we've talked a lot about on this show about that in particular. And what a breach, not only that it's a breach of contract, it's a potential violation of campaign finance. It's a violation of the Section 230 of the Communications Act, which shields those companies from liability as long as they remain neutral, which they're clearly not neutral. But anyways, besides getting into the minutiae of that, it struck me that when you look at what's going on in the left and in thinking about this election, we all sort of like, this is just a cheeky like argument that the left looks a lot like a religion. They really have philosophically abandoned human cognition at a certain level, to the point where they rightfully should be characterized and considered a religious movement. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. In traditional religion, we had this story where there's a fall. Man has original sin. There was the fall in the Garden of Eden, and all human beings by their nature in the eyes of God are sinners, are flawed. And what you're urged to do is to confess and to repent your sins and to seek absolution through the church by confessing your sins to God. And that makes you a person that's good or has good standing in the eyes of God and guarantees you some sort of entrance to the kingdom of heaven, and so on and so forth.
Typical. And you have until the very last moments to come clean with the Lord.
Correct.
You can do whatever you want. You can wantonly just kill and maim and rape and torture, and then 30 seconds before you die, you just give your soul to Jesus and the Lord, and you're cool.
I think so. I mean, I think that's sort of like a Christian concept. Now, other religions take a different view on it and whatever, but that's like the basic gist of like modern organized religion is you have, there's this story, this myth where, man is innately sinful, innately flawed, and he has to seek absolution in the eyes of God by, repenting. And when you look at the modern left, it's really the same type of parable that's informing their entire worldview with the same consequences as religion. In fact, I think they're have gone even further. I think they're kind of back in the 16th and 17th century doing witch trials. So what is the sin? Well, if we go back, they see, when you are fed this sort of like Marxist propagandized version of history, the essential narrative of Marxist history and modern history, postmodern history, is that there are oppressors and there are the oppressed. Everything is seen through the lens of racism, gender, bias, the exploitation of capitalism, and so there are simply good guys and bad guys. There are the oppressed, the proletariat, and there are the capitalist exploiters, the racists, the patriarchy, and so on. And so you have this, like, rather than searching history for causal drivers of these events, this is grievance history. This is looking at history as a way of finding the bad guys and stamping a kind of a good or a bad on the past. And so when you look at history through that lens and you start to see the world, and a lot of these people, I think, probably through either their experiences growing up or life in cities or whatever, they become sort of socially alienated from, I think, American culture, and they're fed this sort of like grievance history narrative, and they end up with this idea that people need help. People are flawed. And who's the ultimate leveler? Who imparts justice to society? Sort of like God.
Central planners do, Doug.
Of course. So the government, and that's what Marxism does, is it really replaces the notion of a God with the state. This majestic institution of central planners that level human beings into this sort of egalitarian utopia.
But in some ways, it's even weirder, if that's possible, than religion. In that, so in religion, man is flawed to begin with, and then you seek redemption through a supernatural being. And then if you get the redemption, then you spend an eternity in this beautiful bliss state, which I don't think anyone that has ever contemplated eternity would ever want to go.
Sounds horrible.
Dude, eternity is the scariest thing of all time.
I know.
Eternity.
I said that once to a religious person. They had no response.
But I think what's weirder about the state being all-knowing or all-wise is that it still starts on that same premise that man is flawed and cannot be trusted. So how, if that premise is true, then how can other men protect you from the thing that you're supposed to be afraid of in the first place?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, of course, who are these angels? As Milton Friedman said, who are these angels?
Right.
In the Politburo that are going to plan society better than you can plan your own life.
Right.
And so, it's absolutely right. And the point is that when you have this sort of like, so you take this, let's take this analogy a little bit further even, now we're into this sense of oppressor and oppressed and victimhood. And now you're imparting a sense of moral idealism to the struggle. Because now this is not just like a metaphysical narrative that we're all kind of, in this state of either the victim or you're either the oppressor or the oppressed. But now you have a sense of, through this like sense of altruism and collective sacrifice, you have this sense of moral struggle against the power. And so it really confers a sense of purpose and idealism, which to a lot of people, especially in our day and age, well, at any time, morality sells. When you have a moral struggle and there's a moral underpinning and an idealism to what you're doing, it motivates people and energizes them. They have a sense that what they're doing is higher than themselves. And
right, and evidence to that point is just you'll notice on election days, right? How many damn pictures do you see on Facebook and stuff of people so proud of themselves that they voted, and they're going to tell you which number they were and which precincts they did and how they are helping to. Do you know what I mean? There's this weird kind of collective, like, I'm part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Merely by vote, like taking part in this process. And there's some civic pride, I think, in being a part of that process. But, I mean, the deeper point is that the left, because of the way they view man's plight as being, a victim, they see the government as metaphysically necessary. It's not just, hey, we're otherwise free people, and we better have a government. If we're gonna survive and thrive and flourish, we better put this government in there to protect us from one another and to settle disputes and protect us from criminals and that kind of thing. And we need this government. It's an important function and, to protecting our individual rights, but it's kind of like this little thing over there that we take it seriously. It's important, but, for free people, it's not the center of your life. Like, the center of your life is your career, your relationships, the choices that you're making every day to further your own life and your own happiness and the humor and joy you get out of every day. There's this government over there, and they do a good job, and they're important, but that's not like the center of your world. Whereas in the leftist universe, the government is not just this little thing on the side. It's like the center of life. It's the driver and the solution. It's the God, that we all serve, because we can't exist without the justice, the egalitarian justice meted out by the state. And
never mind, let's say on a busy Saturday afternoon when you're running around and you've got all these stores to go to. Never mind the fact that nobody's lording over these mutually beneficial transactions that happen, and nobody generally is ripping you off. I mean, it's essentially anarchy on the street. You know what I mean? I walk into a coffee shop and dude doesn't suddenly go $9 for a small coffee. Like, there's no gun to my head. I mean, it's mutually beneficial behavior to provide something people want and to give it to them, and it works for both parties. So there are so many things that are not lorded over day to day that everybody takes for granted.
Right. Well, I mean, from the minute you wake up, all the choices you make and all the things you have and the way we live our lives, there's just trillions of decisions made and actions taken, that are just purely the product of volition and choice and mutual and calculations of mutual advantage, and in the leftist view, that sort of freedom, that kind of quote unquote anarchy of the capitalist system that's what leads to a state of unequalness, and that's what leads to exploitation. And so, in order for society to not fall apart from this anarchy and this capitalist system, we need the majestic central planners to come in and make everything right with the world. And so, getting back a little bit to some of these core issues, this election, and when you look at the last, the generations of political elections, even when a Republican won, I think that the left was, they didn't like the Republican, for their political policies, but there was still a sense that person is still part of this kind of like mainstream view that, of the government. And now you get someone like Trump, And Trump, just his supporters and the people that support him in almost a funny, heckling way are thumbing their nose at Washington, D.C. I mean, clearly, a lot of people certainly support, a lot of Trump's ideas, but the sense of him, and I think the sense amongst the supporters was, this was a way to upend the system and to sort of flout the conventional wisdom and to just give a big FU to the elitist establishment in Washington, D.C., which just takes for granted their position and their power. And, they send this guy in and, he's not part of that system. He hasn't paid his dues. He hasn't run for office. He just ran and won. And so now you got this character who's completely from the outside, who does threaten their world, like literally, in that, he may banish their department or he may, close down certain programs or whatever. But I think morally or like philosophically, this was like thumbing their nose at the whole idea that the government's like metaphysically urgent and important. And it's this big, vast swath of America saying the government's not that important. We're going to put Trump in charge and he's going to go in and just do a bunch of shit. And that's better than what all you clowns are doing.
No, I think you're exactly right on that point, because when you're dealing with literally decade after decade of the same political elitist families,
yes,
you get to a point where you really feel trapped inside this crazy system that you're like, oh, great, another Bush. Oh, great, another Clinton.
Right.
That's really a scary proposition.
Yes.
And I remember just, I'm not one to like get super excited about presidential politics or anything, but I took delight in some of the cartoonish nature of the debates themselves between Hillary and Trump. Like, to me, at this point, I'm like, okay, my entire adult life and my prepubescent life have all been like these same characters or characters who are connected or related to one another.
Right.
I'm like, run an animal at this point, because run a chimp, because this isn't funny anymore.
Yeah.
And it became funny. A part of it became funny. And, obviously Trump has been in the conscious minds of people for going back to the 80s. He's a household name and has been for a long time.
Right.
And he's crass and he's rude and he's got an ego, like, he's got a huge ego. He's just all over the place. But it's funny.
Yeah.
And that's better than what we've been getting, and people really just at this point are fed up and are just like, come on.
And, in particular, I think they see amongst his supporters, not just the sort of image of Trump or the symbol of Trump as being, this guy who's just like pulled the curtain back on the wizard and just exposed DC for being just a bunch of clowns. And instead of like going through these rituals of trying to connote, some sort of majesty to the political process and to what the genius central planners are doing, he basically said, you guys are a bunch of idiots. I'm not even a politician. I'm going to come in there and run this and do better than you. And everyone said, yeah, let's try it. That's funny. Great. And so this set these people off. And there's also an element where the sense, I think, of his supporters that, this deeper sense that there are people, in the heartland of the country that really love America. They love the Constitution. They're very frightened about what's happened in Washington and the amount of power the central government has. And the left, as a religion now, sees those people as symbolizing, now let's go back to religion a little bit. When you're a rational person, like two reasonable people, like if I say, hey, water boils at 100 degrees, you and I can only debate that for so long. I mean, eventually I can just show you and we can talk about, the nuances of that. But, I can make a claim like that and we can we can figure it out. With this situation, when you reject cognition at a certain level, and you're not rational, the people that are, in any religion, the non-believers, are to be suppressed. Of course, that's the history up until modern, Reformation and the separation of church and state, and the state that we have now with modern religion existing peacefully in the West. But before that, religion was, and certainly in the Muslim countries, there is no separation. If you don't believe these words and this worldview, you need to be excommunicated. You're a heretic. You need to be stifled. You need to be shut up. Your books will be burned. We're not going to even allow people, because when you abandon reason, if you believe in reason and rationality, you're like, bring it on. I'll just show you. I'll prove my case to you. But when you don't have that and you're relying on a non-cognitive argument, you need to prevent other people from hearing your message.
There should be no speaker, no position that a rational person wouldn't allow to the table, so that they can show very clearly that they can argue their case better. But when you're physically preventing people from speaking, and you're calling people heretics or deniers,
shouting them down,
this or that, just shouting them down, that means typically that you do not have a well thought out position that you can defend.
Yeah, otherwise, why wouldn't you just say, okay, let me show you. Here it is. Here's the proof.
Yeah, because it'll take 2 seconds. It should take you 2 seconds to refute that other side.
But instead, what we're seeing are these hordes of people that are really being, their minds are being destroyed in these college propaganda machines, where they're fed this kind of narrative, and they hold these views, in a sense, not through reason or rationality. It's an emotional sense of injustice, and they're taught to act. They're taught to lash out. If someone disagrees with you, you're a good person and you're empathetic. So anyone that disagrees with you politically, there's no reason to analyze their argument or see where they're coming from. If they're for the Second Amendment, they must want to kill children. Right. If they believe in the rights of the accused and civil liberties and presumption of innocence, they must want to sexually assault women. They support rape, and they're guilty for every rape that, you actually heard people saying this, not kooks, but like mainstream people saying, anyone that supports Kavanaugh or votes for Kavanaugh is now responsible for every rape that occurs from here on after, because they support sexual assault. I mean, these are the kind of arguments you're hearing. And if I really believe that, if I was one of them, I probably would chase people down in restaurants. I mean, you would be at the point of thinking, if I really thought people politically against me endorsed sexual assault and really wanted to kill children and babies, and wanted to rip the immigrants rip the babies at the border, and they want to put people in concentration camps. If I thought that was what the government was up to, I'd be in the streets too.
No, it's real. The emotions of those people are real.
Yes.
That's what makes it kind of scary. I mean, I was in, there was this kind of soccer bar that I really liked hanging out at, mostly because I liked the bartender girl in Chicago. And yes, and there was this woman who was actually a lawyer who I started talking to, and she seemed kind of normal at first, and then she started getting into politics. This was shortly after the election. Mm-hmm. And I took on this sort of like, I try to see the humor and everything, and I was kind of being blasé about it and laughing, and when she learned that I did not vote for Hillary, she literally got in my face.
Ooh.
And was like, her face got like 3 inches from mine, and she told me that the whole election was my fault.
Oh.
my fault.
Your fault. Yeah, it was. It is your fault.
And it wasn't.
She should kill you. You have to be purged. No, you're a non-believer. You're a denier.
Well, and what's interesting is the way the way that the run-of-the-mill establishment Democrats turn on the more progressive element. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if you voted for Jill Stein or something like that, they want blood, man. You are the reason. It doesn't matter that statistically, like it's been proven that even if every Jill Stein or everyone that voted for who was the
Gary Johnson,
right? Even if all of those people had voted for Hillary, she still would have lost. But you know what number is bigger are the people who previously voted for Obama and then voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. So they're still assigning blame to the wrong people. If we want to talk blame, they're still going after anyone for daring to try to break out of this two-party system.
Right.
It's your fault. Just like it was Nader's fault back in, you know what I mean? It's always, so they're using shame to stop people from, because wouldn't it be nice if there were a third and a fourth party?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yes.
But with the amount of shaming going on, it's like, they're like, if all these people, didn't vote for Jill Stein, then blah. And I'm thinking, well, if all of you people stop towing the line and voting for someone whose core values actually line up with yours more, and no, we have to just, they're just trying not to lose. Mm-hmm. But you know what I'm saying? But yeah, the anger is real. I mean, I remember just having to get off Facebook in the lead up to the election because I couldn't believe what was coming out of people's mouths.
Well, and it's getting worse. And I think the Kavanaugh thing took things to a fever pitch in that, I still, even up to the Kavanaugh, as connected as I am to all of this, I still believe that it was more just this really strong progressive section of the Democrats that was really sort of unhinged and deranged. And you started hearing, mainstream Democrats even, rejecting the idea of the presumption of innocence, saying that we just have to believe. You're seeing senators, mainstream Democratic senators making that kind of a case. And you start to realize that, when you start kind of seeing things on a more fundamental level about, the sort of abandonment of, cognitive way of thinking about politics and this more religious sense, the left as being a religious movement, and then you start, piling on the ideas of critical race theory and the idea of white privilege, where there is no, there was at least a time when you could seek some sort of penance. Now, if you're a white person, if you deny that you have white privilege, that's evidence of your crime. So if you deny you're a witch, that's evidence that you are a witch. And so now they're starting to attribute characteristics to people on the basis of their race. And, this is a real scary movement. I mean, this is not just, people that are after a certain political outcome or a certain political policy. This is a whole new way of approaching and orienting yourself to the world, which is fundamentally anti-human. It's anti-reason and it's anti-human. It's, a view that people need to be herded into camps and non-believers need to be liquidated. The same kinds of things that we've seen in the wake of every socialist communist revolution, when people start going to gulags and concentration camps and the state takes over the media and the state seizes the means of production and, the central planners start, cracking down on businessmen and, you start having shortages and people start having to eat dogs in the street like they are in Venezuela now. I mean, this is what these people represent. This is what they're really after. And it's this, and I never really... It's hard for us, given our experience living in the U.S., it's hard to understand how that kind of philosophical culture can develop in a society, in a sort of communist society, before a kind of revolution occurs and those people actually seize the reins of power. I think what we're seeing now is a culture ripening to that kind of authoritarianism, and it's not on the right, it's the left. And when I want to make another point that this is partly what explains what we're seeing on the social media platforms, where these leftists regard any kind of dissenting thought as being dangerous. And if you go through the Good Censor, I was going to start to read through this, but we don't really have time. But if you Google the Good Censor, this 85-page briefing that Google did, it's clear when on the surface, it always sounds like, they're just worried about really extreme, crazy stuff, like threats of violence and,
right.
Understood, right? But that's not what they mean. I mean, when you start really going through what they're saying, they regard anyone that disagrees with them as being a Nazi. So, there's two kinds of nationalism. There's what Mises called liberal nationalism, where you rationally love your community, your ancestors, your family, your town, and you have an affinity and a common bond with the people you live with and the people in your area and the laws and institutions and culture that you've grown up with, and that's rational. It's real, and and to the extent that you see those institutions and that culture providing a great life for those around you, you begin to love your country, and you should. And that's sort of like a rational liberal nationalism. And of course, the left conflates that kind of nationalism with the state told me I have to like whatever they do, the sort of Nazi nationalism. And so to them, they conflate nationalism, or they assume that any kind of patriotism, rational patriotism, for the ideals of the country, if not the actual, practice of it, but the ideals and the, our founding spirit, they conflate that with like Nazism. So if you believe in the flag, or if you sing the national anthem or believe in the Pledge of Allegiance or anything like that, that's Nazi to them. That's racist to them. And so there's, what do you do? I mean, there's no, you can counter argue this and try and make this sort of nuanced, reasoned argument I just made. If I tried to make this argument on a college campus, I'd probably be punched. I'd be shouted down. I'd be heckled. I'd be threatened. And so, these kinds of distinctions and this kind of thinking, just trying to analytically make a case about what you think the nature of government should be and why, they're not listening. They've already been given their marching orders, and if you disagree with them, you're a Nazi, and they're justified in punching you. And there's nowhere that goes except war. Because when you're at that level, just like in any religious situation, religious people aren't looking to reason with you necessarily at this level. You either believe or you're out. And unfortunately, that's kind of the state we're in right now. And I don't really see any remedy to this. I see a vast portion of the country is still honest, and I think it's up to those kinds of people to continue to fight. But that's why I think, the Democrats at this point are scary. They're not. I think there was a time for nuance in past elections, and I think you could argue persuasively about certain candidates being important for this reason or that reason, or this person's better on civil liberties, or this person is better on the economy, or whatever you want to say. I think at this point, I just see I see a mob on the left.
Yeah, I mean, if you just follow it through rationally, like, where does this lead? Like, what is going to put out these flames? You know what I mean? It's just It just feels like it's coming to this head. It feels, my conspiratorial side just feels like the flames are getting fanned on purpose. I just see it. It just seems like so much seems like a setup to me. It's I don't know. I think it's sort of weird. It's really weird that Bill and Hillary are going out on the stadium tour So I think it's also weird that Trump keeps having campaign rallies. So, because who has ever done that? I mean, it's hilarious on the one hand. It's hilarious. But it's keeping things at this fever pitch. So you've got his supporters, and obviously people like you and I have more of a nuanced kind of angle on Trump, and we have a more idealized version of what we would like to see, far beyond his ability to be eloquent.
Right.
So we're a little bit different, but so the general sort of audience member in a Trump rally is sort of like awash in religious fervor too. So that's kept at that fever pitch. And then Bill and Hillary are hitting the road. So it's almost like we never left that fucking election cycle. And every time Hillary's been interviewed on anything, she's talking about the 2016 election. Yeah. It's not like, well, what are you doing now? Oh, well, we've renamed the Clinton Foundation, and we're now like running amok in different parts of the world under, it's like, we dipped our toe, Haiti worked for a minute there, and now we're on to bigger and better things. No, it's all still about the election. So it's just being kept where it's at, which is really weird.
Well, that seemed to be a strategy of the left, though, because I remember early on after Trump, there was this talking point that went out that we can't normalize. The left said we can't normalize Trump. So there was never any there was never any mercy given. There was never any, okay, well, let's move on and just like fight him on the issues. It was like, no, this is not legitimate. This is not a legitimate person. This is an evil person. He's not our president. We're going to resist. We're going to, anything now is justified in the name of opposing Trump, whether it's, criminal in some fashion. There's no line you can't cross as long as you justify it with trying to get at Trump. So they've created this kind of bogeyman.
Right.
And to some extent, I think you're right. I mean, I would have thought more that this is sort of a diabolical move on the left. If I hadn't seen kind of with my own eyes, not just like the 13 people that are stalking Ted Cruz in a restaurant, but, the fact that there's this massive movement of people that are, that I considered to be pretty reasonable people at one time who are completely deranged. That have bought into this in some way, and that's what scares me, is that it's kind of gone beyond.
Is that the zombie apocalypse that people talk about? Seriously, because
yes,
obviously we've talked about how it's really lame that nobody will invent new monsters. It's always zombies, or what are the other ones? Vampires. Essentially the same deal.
Yeah.
But I think we'd agree that there is no philosophical debate nationally. Like, you can go back as little as like 20, 30 years, even on a show like Phil Donahue, right?
Yes.
There is some real debate going on.
Yes.
You could have sort of a libertarian type at a university debate a super far left socialist type, and it's really like respectful all the way around.
Yes.
They couldn't disagree more. However, there is a debate happening. There's literally there are no philosophical core issues being discussed whatsoever. It's now just tweets against tweets. People are literally being attacked on the street. I mean, there's so much video evidence of people just cold cocking, just running up and punching people in the face. Do you remember the knockout game from a few years ago where people just like, we're just going to fuck people up? I think you mentioned this earlier, but there were, like 2 state senators that were just, like, one dude just got punched in a restaurant in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think it's postmodernism, because the message of postmodernism, particularly when I was in college, not, way back when, even then, was everything is political and everything has to be seen through this lens of victimhood. And so, we've had generations of people steeped in that now, that are running the academy, that are spawning, more intellectuals in the media, that it's seeping into, obviously into journalism, but into law. And, we're getting the government that reflects that division. And it's a dead end. I mean, there's no argument that can be made, like you said. I mean, go back and watch YouTube of the 70s or 80s, like you said, like a Phil Donahue or a Dick Cavett show, or even Johnny Carson used to have philosophical people on and would talk about issues.
Oh, and for sure. Well, like Milton Friedman was on Donahue all the time.
Sure. Ayn Rand was on Donahue.
Yeah,
or on Carson. All those shows.
And what's interesting is, like, the sort of decorum, or just the general flavor of, like, I remember Donahue just really listening and being like, really, you believe this, blah, blah, blah. Well, just fast forward some years later, and Donahue was on MSNBC. He had the highest rated show. And when he took unpopular positions, they kicked him out. So even he was too, you know what I mean? Like, he did not fit the mold.
Right.
Anyone questioning any of the wars under Obama, like Ed Schultz, do you remember Ed Schultz from MSNBC?
Yeah, gone.
He went to, he got flown out to cover Bernie Sanders' announcement that he was going to run. And so he's in Vermont, and they pulled the plug on him on the last minute to cover some, like, 10-year-old's birthday party in, like, Texas somewhere. And so he goes to RT, which has way more truth. Like, they're getting all these people who are, like, actually far left, sort of anti-imperialist types, which I'm sympathetic to a lot of those guys on at least the foreign policy side of certain things.
Yeah.
They all get the rug pulled out from under them on CNN, MSNBC, and the like. They go to places like RT, people like Chris Hedges and stuff, and then RT is yanked from everything because it's a Russian state,
Yeah, it's a conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy. Can't have that.
No, heavens.
Oh, but MSNBC has John Brennan. Now the left is just fine with the ex-CIA director now that he's against their enemy. They love the CIA. They love the FBI.
Oh, and
we cannot
also
question
like Michael Hayden too.
Oh yeah,
they
love these guys.
Like, I think it was like
Clapper
6 years ago. They're like, he was like arguing about what the Fourth Amendment means, and he said, "It just says we against unreasonable searches and seizures." Yeah, but what does that mean? And he's like, "Well, we decide."
Yeah,
like at the time,
whatever the government says is reasonable. Okay, now, it's just frightening to me that what you thought, even the Democrats stood for even a year ago is completely upended. Just go look at like videos of like what Feinstein and Clinton and Obama were saying while they were president. I mean, they were anti-immigration.
Sure.
And they were diametrically opposed to what the Democrats stand for now.
Right. Well, and another sort of like proof positive thing is how, I think George Bush the second was a pretty terrible president.
Agreed.
And whatever, he. I don't know. They, whatever. WMDs, they got us into a kind of a weird quagmire over there. And, everybody hated them. And it was like the world was seeing the largest anti-war protests. I mean, they were everywhere. The media never showed it. They never showed any of that. And then so people just, hate the Bushes, most for correct reasons, I think. But if Bush hates Trump, now they like him. Now Bush is dancing with Ellen on her show.
Oh, yes. Michelle loves him.
Yeah, I must have seen like 15 Twitter and Facebooks of like, I kind of like him now.
Mm-hmm.
I just, as long as you hate Trump.
Yeah.
They will like you no matter.
It
doesn't matter if you're a war criminal.
You're in the religion. Once you're in the religion, then you're accepted.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not. Otherwise, you're a heretic. No, the hypocrisy, especially on foreign policy, where these people are urging us to, bomb Syria, or attack the Russians or whatever. And then, we were going to talk about the Saudi stuff. I think we'll get to that next time because I wanted to go into the killing of this guy and, sort of the history of the Saudis. We don't have time to go through it now, but we can talk a little bit more about the sort of hypocrisy of the liberal establishment when it comes to war. That's one of my favorite topics, but
yeah.
Let's wrap up here. We actually had some comedy stuff. I think we've kind of gone over an hour though, so maybe we should do that next time.
Yeah, let's just do it next time. I think that we just kind of found the conversation and it just took on a life of its own, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it wasn't that funny. Next time we promise to be a little bit more funny.
Now I'm just mad, Doug, about everything we talked about.
You should be permanently outraged.
All right. Well, thanks again for having me on for the chat.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that go to House of Sunny, go to Patreon House of Sunny to support us. We're all fan funded, so we could definitely use your support. If you do donate to Patreon, you get to be part of the elite squad on Facebook. And we just put out a video where Sunny and I analyzed this awful socialist video and kind of mystery science theatered it, which is pretty good. And so you get all sorts of stuff like that, as well as access to the group. So please join us and help us at a Patreon, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded. And because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.